All right, welcome back to Genius. So in this class, let's talk about CSS Box Model. Okay. I remember when I started learning, even till now, it's still somehow confusing. Okay. So it is something that will take time to really explain for you guys to understand what this CSS Box Model really is. And it's actually interesting because if you know how this CSS Box Model works, you can do a whole lot with your HTML elements. Right? I mean, when structuring them, when working with paddings, your margins, and making your web page look very good. So let's take a look at it. So in this chapter, in this class, you'll be reading chapter 13 or the docket, that's HTML and CSS, written by docket. You'll be reading chapter 13. And for Robbins, you'll be reading chapter 14. Okay. When you read these chapters, a lot of things are going to make more sense. So we'll be taking a look at the box model. We'll take a look at the content. We'll take a look at the padding, the border, and the margin. Okay. We'll also take a look at the width, height, and the box sizing properties. And your assignment will be to create a card layout. All right, you just create a card layout, add padding and margins, apply a border and a background color to this card layout. That will be your assignment. Okay. All right. So what is box model? Now, the CSS box model is the fundamental concept in web design and layout. So before I continue with this grammar that I'm speaking here, let me take you to the browser. So I will just open this our application. Any of this can work. So I will go live. Okay. So I'm going to show you the boss model here. Okay. This is the boss model here. You can see what is highlighted here is the H2. Okay, look at it. If I change look at where I'm clicking. If I here I'm clicking on the H3. If I select H2, you will see that a lot of properties here will change. If I click on H2, you can see. Now you can see that this what we are seeing here, what we have here is the box model of this. Every HTML element is represented as a box on the browser. All right. Every HTML, you can see what we have here is H2. If I click on this H3, we look at the element we have here. All right. So it is being displayed as block. We take a look at that later on. The font size is 1.7 EM, margin block start, blah, 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 blah. But look at what we are seeing here. Okay. You can see this is the whole box. This is the whole box. And inside the innermost of the box, we have the content. You see, when I take my mouse around this, you can see that the subsection over here will be highlighted. Look at it. This will be highlighted as soon as I take my mouse. As soon as I take my mouse inside of this content. Because so this is the content. Okay. So this will be, I wanted to draw something, so that will not be necessary anymore. Let me close this guy. Okay, so I'll go back to my browser. Okay, so this is the boss model. You can see this is the content, all right? And then anything, this is the content, and you can see the border. Look at the border, look at the border. You see, this one I've just changed color now is the border. You can see you can see all these things around it. This is the border. Okay, so this is the content of this element. And any space between the content and the border is the padding. You can see that the padding lies between the border, all right, lies between the border and the content. And this is the whole border, and this is the whole padding. Okay, look at the border here. The border has this, I don't know what color I would call this now. And this is the padding, and this is the content. So every element is represented as a box, and the box has the content part, the padding part, the border part, and the margin part. All these things make up the whole box, the whole element. Okay, all these things make up the whole element. All right, you can see when I take my mouse over this pad margin, you can see there are some colors on the web page by the left side. If I take it to the border, nothing shows but the padding. But you can see the one word, let's go ahead. This class is going to be very interesting. Okay, so now it describes how every element is considered as a rectangular box and its dimensions and spacings are calculated. So with the box model, all right, it describes how the HTML element is considered as a rectangular box and also how the dimension, the padding, the margin, the whatever, the size, the height, everything is calculated. Okay, so this is crucial because all CSS properties like the width, the height, the padding, the border margin rely on this. So if you don't understand this box model, all right, presenting your elements would be somehow. Okay, I can still remember some difficulties I faced when I tried to position, when I tried to walk around with my web page. Okay, don't worry, when we get to real development, you're going to be seeing more of this. So what is the bus module? Every element in a web page is a bus consisting of four parts. I just showed you them now. The first one is, you can see, this is how it looks, okay? Now the content is in the center, all right? The content is in the center. Above the content is the padding. So the padding is between the content and the border is between the padding and the margin, okay? So this is how it looks. I'll take you back to the browser. This particular class is very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. So you can see that this is the whole boss, all right? And it is made up of four different parts: the content, the padding, the border, and the margin, okay? All right. So the box layers, all right, from the innermost to the outermost, we have the content, which is the actual content like the text, the image, or the video. So the content, each size is defined by the width of the height, the width and the height. So now if I go back to our HTML page, this is the element, all right, and this is the content. This is the content. It can be text or it can be other elements. All right. This paragraph, this is the whole box, and everything in here is the content. This content can be ordinary text or it can also be like this one now. This is the whole element and this is the content. All right. And even this one also have other content inside of it. So every element has the content, which could be text or even other elements. The padding is the space between the content and the border. They are transparent. You don't normally see it unless you color it. All right. You don't normally see it. Okay. It is transparent. Then the border wraps the content plus the padding and it is visible. The border is visible. All right. The padding and the margin are transparent. They are not visible. Okay. Now the margin is the space outside the border, creating distance between elements. Okay. So if I go back now, all right, you see, um, this is the content of this div. This I just highlighted now is the content of this div, okay? And then if you look at this div and this paragraph and also this paragraph, all right? The padding, the margin is the space between each these elements. So if I go back to the boss, so where do we have that? Okay, let me go back and see where we have that. Okay, sorry, I can find it here. So the div. All right, this is the div. All right, so you can see this div now. Okay, okay, so this is the div. Okay, you can see if I take my mouse over it, all right, it will be highlighted by the left hand side. Okay, all right, so let me adjust this. So look at it. If I take my mouse over the margin of this div, okay, you can see this is the div. Okay, the div doesn't have. Okay, I don't think the div have any margin. We didn't specify any margin, but it's like from our style sheet, we specified some margin on the paragraph. So let's go back to our style sheet. Okay, there's no margin. Okay, so I want to explain something here. So you can see that these guys have some you can see, if I take my mouse over this paragraph, on the left-hand side, you can see that the margin has some, would I call this thing orange color? And you can see the content is in blue. So if I also take it back here, okay, if I take it back here, you can see the margin, okay? This div does not have any margin at all. That is why the margin is not showing for it. Look at the style here. It doesn't have any margin at all. Now, what it means is this, the browser didn't, because we didn't add any margin, the browser by default doesn't add margin to div. So, but for the paragraphs, you can see that it has some margin. It has some margin. That is why we have some colors around. Okay. But because the border is, we didn't, we can add, and there's a way to add, okay. No, there is a way to add. Hmm. Okay, I can just add border, and then the value would be. Oops. Okay, I'm trying to try out something now, but let's forget about it. Okay, there's a way you can add. I have forgotten. There's a way you can add some styles in here. I don't know. I have forgotten. Okay, so now, so look at what I'm saying. The margin is above. The border is here. The border is between the margin and the padding is between the border and the content. Okay, let's continue. So how dimensions are calculated? How do we calculate dimensions? How do we calculate dimensions? By default, we use what we call the content bus. All right, by default, we use what we call the content bus. So by default, when you set width and height, it only applies to the content of of that element. Let me explain. So if I go on to our style sheet now, I think this is the one we are using on this page. If I go on now and say, um, maybe I should just, if I go on and say that the width is, let's say 200 pixel, all right, and the height is, let's say 100 pixel. Okay. Now you see this width and height that I have defined here. They will only be applied to the content. That means the content will now have more height and more width now. Check out, the content will be bigger or smaller depending. Okay. So if I go back to the browser, okay, where am I? All the H, okay. You can see now, look at it. Look at it. I am highlighting one of the paragraphs, and you can see the content says 200 by 100. But before then, it was now by default, all right, by default, every content, every element, all right, the content would expand to the width of the browser or the containing element. By default. You can see now this div is 596 by 100. That's width by height. Okay. But I have defined width and height for all my H. If we look at this H5, it's not included in my style. So I have H1 to be 200 by 100, and this H5 has 596 by 16. And you can see when I take my mouse over it, all right, look at the whole coloring highlight is everything is highlighted, and it extends to the width of the browser. As I expand this browser, it the content is also expanded. You can see the width and the height has also expanded. But because of the H1, I've given it something, all right? You can see that the width is now very small. The H1, why is it not highlighting? Okay. Okay, so see the H1 here. All right, you can see I have restricted the width. I restricted the width to 200, and I restricted the height to 100. That is why it is now smaller. The height it is taller, and the width is actually smaller. All right. But if you take a look at the H2, the style that I applied, I didn't apply width. or height to it. So it has the width of the browser or the containing element. Do you understand? So if I go on to this div, all right, this div is also 200 by, but the paragraph inside this div is 200 by 100. Okay, I just hope I'm making sense here. Please, if you don't understand, you can actually drop your question in the WhatsApp group. Okay, so the width and the height will be applied only to the content. It will not affect the border, the padding, or the margin. That by default. So look at it now. You see this style rule here applies only, this would only, the 200 by 100 pixel width and height will only apply to the content area. It will only apply to the content area. So, but the actual space occupied would be, all right, the actual space occupied by the whole element. Remember, the actual space occupied by the whole element would be, let me show you, the actual space would be the content, the padding, and the border. This would be the actual space occupied by the element. The margin is used to separate between two elements. The actual space occupied, sorry, the actual space occupied is actually all of them, okay? But the width, all right, the width, because by default it is content box, the width only applies here. But I'm going to explain another type, but the actual space occupied by this whole element includes both the margin, the actual space, not the width. Okay, this can be confusing, so pay close attention. So by default, when you add width and height, they will only apply to the content. That, look at it, it's only on the content. The 200 by 100 is only on the content. Okay, so now if you want to calculate by default, when we use the content box, all right, if you want to calculate the width, the total width of this box, we'll add the padding, we'll add the width and the height, we'll add the padding, and we'll add the border. That this is not the total width. This will be the total width of the box, of the element. All right? Okay. So look at it. The 200 for the width, all right? The content width, all right? The content width plus the 10 pixels. This 10 pixels was times 2. It came from, if you go back, the 10 pixels came from the pad. Look at the padding is 10 pixel and the border is 5. So the padding will be both left and right. So that is why we did times 2 here. All right. Remember, the padding is around it, left and right. Okay. So left and right, that's times 2. And the border is also left and right times 2. That is why we got 230. The height is not included. So the width, the total width of that is the total width that is actually occupied by that element when you're using by the default, all right, which is content box, is that the width, the content width plus the left and the right padding plus the left and right border. That's why we have this. So the height will not be the content height, which is 100, plus the top. Remember that the top, we have the padding there as 10. The bottom is also 10. Then the top border is also 5. The bottom border is also 5. So the total height will not be something like this. Okay, so look at the mathematics very well, carefully. All right, the content width is the width, which is 200, plus the left and the right padding. The left and the right padding, that's the width. Now look at, let me go back. See, we are calculating the width, which is from here to here. So first of all, we'll calculate the 200 pixel, which is the content width. Then the padding, the left and the right, which is 10, 10. So 10 here, which will be times 2, which will be 20. And then the border, which is 5 here, 5 here. That's how we got the total width. If you want to get the total height, you will calculate the height, which is 100 here, plus the top and the bottom padding, all right? Then plus the top and the bottom border. That's how you get it. This is the default. So the total area is 230 times 130 plus the margin. That's the total area, all right? The total area. When you're calculating the total width, all right, or the total height, you don't include the margin. But when you now calculate the total area, the total space occupied by the whole element, you will include the margins. Okay. So alternative model, all right, we can use the border boss. By default, the browser uses the content boss to calculate the size of our elements, but you can actually change it to border boss, all right? And it's advisable to use border boss. It's advisable to use border boss. So here, you will now include this border boss sizing property and assign it to border boss. You can also assign it to content boss. You can either have border boss as a value or content boss as a value. So, but remember, when you're doing content boss, that means everything, the weight, the pattern, everything will add together to make up the weight. But when you're using the boss sizing, all right, it changes how the dimensions are being calculated. So when you say that the width is 200, the browser is going to give the whole width area to be 200. It will include both the padding and the border. So it will not add the border and the padding differently. So look at it. When we say the width is 200 pixels, it would include the padding and the border. That means it would calculate the padding and the border and then subtract it here. So the content width will now be 200 pixels. Do you understand? Minus the padding and the border. Because the whole 200 pixel width here includes both the content, the padding, and the border. So the browser will find a way to share it amongst these three spaces, these three areas. So have 200 minus padding and border, all right, which is be 200 minus 10 pixel both left and right, 5 pixel both left and right for the border and so this will now be the content width. So this makes the layout management easier and prevents elements from unexpectedly growing. All right, so always make sure you use the boss sizing and make it to be border boss. So let's go back to our style. So I'm now going to I'll now say, where did I here? I gave height to be this. So I will now say boss sizing is equal to, you can see, these are the different values you can give it. You can also use the calculate, whatever, inherit and all that, but here we are going to use the border boss. By default, it is content boss. Even if you don't provide it, to use content boss, but we make it border boss. And let's save. Remember, we said that the width is 200. So now let's also add padding. Let's also add padding to be 10 pixel, and then we'll add border to be, let's say 5 pixel. Okay. Now, if I save now, we can go to the browser and look at it. If you can see now, everything have changed here. You can see now, remember we gave the whole width to be 200. Before, it was just 200 here, 200 and 100. But now, you can see it has done the calculation. It has taken the 10 for the padding left and right, all right, and it has done the calculation. So the border, why is the border not showing? The border is 5 pixels. It should show. It should show. For some reason, it's not showing, so there is an error. Maybe it's from my code. What's this thing again? Okay. I have to include, oh, sorry. We'll talk about, even if we don't talk about it in this, yeah, we'll talk about whenever you're adding border, all right? Whenever you're adding border to your element, you make sure that you add the border style. Okay, I think you will be reading this thing in the book, all right? I don't think I will be mentioning it here, but you'll be reading it in the book, so make sure you read the chapters, okay? Whenever you're adding border, if you don't add the style of the border, all right, it would not show. So I would go back to here and then I would add the border style. It could be solid or anything else. So if I save now, go back to the browser, you can see it has been added. It has been added. All right, and you can see this has been deducted. Okay, and you can see now you can see we have some border around these things now. Okay, all right, so that is pretty much it. So you can see how you calculate it now. All right, so when it is box sizing, when you use box sizing, remember that the width and the height would include both the padding and the border. But if you don't include box sizing and use the default, which is content box, the width will just be for the content width only. All right, so these are some of the properties of the box model. We have the width, the height, we have the padding, we have the border, we have the margin, and we have the box sizing. So this one says the content area size. This one says the inner spacing, okay, the thickness. The border is for the thickness and start of the outer line around the box. The space, the margin is the space between the border and the other elements. Okay, so these are shorthands. Oops. Sorry, this is not supposed to be here. All right, sorry, that was not supposed to be there. So for padding, all right, you can add the padding. This is the shorthand for adding the padding. Now, this will go from top, right, bottom, left. This one is for the top right, for the top. So this one is for the top, padding top. This one is for the padding right. The 20 is for the padding right. The 15 is for the padding bottom. And then the 5 pieces for the padding left. All right, so this top is 10 pixel, right is 20 pixel, bottom is, so it is from top, right, bottom, left. All right, you can use trouble. You can use trouble to as a way to remember it. Trouble, T-R-O-B-L. T-R-O-B-L, all right? Trouble. So this is the shorthand, or you can do the padding left, padding right, padding top, okay? So the margin, you can also add it. When you add margin also, it centers the block elements horizontally. So when you say the margin of a particular element is auto, all right, it will center the element. It will make the element to be in the center of its containing element. So if I go back to, I believe we are using day one, right? I don't know which one are we even using. Which file are we using? Okay, day one. So I'll go to day one. I'll go to day one. So now, if I want this div to be in the center, okay, if I want, okay, I can even go back to the CSS and I say, I want all these guys, I want them to be in the center. So I can use margin and I'll say everything auto like this. Now, when you use a shorthand method like this, the first one, the first value will be for top and bottom, and the next one will be for right and left. So we are saying for the top and bottom, make it 0 pixel, and for the left and right, make it auto. So the browser will automatically do it for you. You can see that it has centered all these guys. It has put them in the center. So if you want to center, one of the ways to center your element is to use margin as auto. All right. Even if let's try to do let's try to do everything as auto. Let's see what happens. Save. Oops, sorry, I didn't save. So that's not save. You can see now it is now in the center, even top and left. You can see it's now in the center. Okay. All right. So if I go as 0, look at it. If I put it back to 0, look at what happens. There is a space. Look at it. There is a space. There is a space here. So if I go on and save this file, now you'll see that space will be out. Okay, it seems like okay, let me do something like 10 pixel. There'll be more space. All right, you can see there is more space. If I make it 100, there will be more space, okay? All right, all right. So I can also, all right. So I don't need to do this. With this now, all the 4 corners of it would be auto. The browser will sort it out. It's left for the browser to find a space between them. So this is how you center your element, okay? So for visual representation, we have already had a visual representation of all these parts using the box model I showed in the browser. So for modern best practices, use border box by default. When you're writing your elements, your styles, use border box by default. It prevents surprises with sizing. So one thing you will try to be doing is, you see this universal selector. Remember what we use it for? We use it to select all the elements. So instead of me, I can just come and say, make this a habit. Most when I used to see these things, I didn't understand what it means. So I will now come and say boss sizing. I will say border boss. So this will make, I don't need to put this thing here now. I don't need to put it here. It means that everything will not be using boss sizing as border boss. I believe you understand. So this makes all bosses have predictable behaviors. You can predict them. So common issues and fixes. Elements can be larger than expected. When they are larger than expected, check your box sizing. Check if your box sizing content is content box. Switch it to border box. Always try to put all your universal selector to be border box and border box. Unwanted spaces around elements. There could be unwanted spaces around elements. So inspect your margin collapse. There's something we call margin collapse. Okay. When you have, let me show you what margin collapse is. You can see we have two elements. We have two elements here. All right. You can see that they are overlapping. So let's go and let's go to let's go and put margin. Let's do margin. Let's say 20 pixel for top and bottom. And you can see there are spaces now. Do you understand? There are spaces now. So now, when what's it called again? Margin collapsing is when these two, when if I put the margin of this particular element now to be something like 50, and the bottom margin, if I put the bottom margin of this one to be something like 50, and I put the top margin of this one to be 30, you will be expecting that there will be 80, 50 plus 30 space between them. No, it will not happen like that. That's what we call margin collapsing. Okay. If the bottom of this tiniest heading now is 50, and the margin top of this H6 is 30, you will be expecting that there will be 80 pixel space between them because of their margin. It will not work like that. The browser will take the highest, the highest value. In this case, it is 50 pixel. 50 and 30, the highest value here is 50. So the browser will put a 50 pixel margin between them. That's what we mean by what's it called again? Margin collapsing. You would also read it in the book. Okay. So make sure you inspect your margin collapsing. Alignment problems, inspect pattern and border width. So when you understand this box model, all right, you will not be having issues with your elements, the way they are being structured. Okay. So look at this now. We have this div. Okay. So the result is the total width of this. Remember, we are using box sizing to be border box. So what will be the total width of this? The total width will be 300 because we are using border box. If we are not using border box, if we are using content box, that means the total width will be 300 plus padding times 2, which will be 40. That will be 340 plus 5 times 2, which will be 10. So everything will be 350. If we were using content box, the padding and the border will be added to this width and it will be more than 300. But since we're using border box, everything will be inside the padding and the border will be taken from this 300. So when you minus 20 plus 20, which is 40, plus 10, which is 50, the content width will now be 250. Okay. All right. So a quick recap. Content box is width or height, and it excludes the padding and the border. Border box is width and height, including the padding and the border. Margin and padding are transparent. Borders are visible and take up space. So thank you very much. Please read the books. When you read these books, you get to understand more. All right. The books will expand a whole lot of things. Form the habit of reading books. We have provided the book chapters to read. Read the two books, the two chapters, you will understand better. If you have any questions, drop it in the comment in the WhatsApp group so that we can talk about it in our live class. Do your assignment, do your test, and I'll see you in the next class. Peace and love.